All right, good afternoon. Thanks everybody for joining into this call. We're going to be having another talk on the topic of the upcoming Campus Cyberinfrastructure NSF solicitation. And Wendy was happy to give us some time and give us a little bit of her expertise and her experience with this program. So I'm going to turn it over to Wendy Huntoon to talk a little bit about this CC Star program. And if you do have questions during, certainly use the chat feature, but we'll try to leave a lot of time for questions at the end as well. So go ahead, Wendy.
Thanks, Jason. I'm very happy I could join you all. So just some housekeeping. I'm going to give Jason the slide deck after the presentation. I always find typos when I'm going through it, so it'll be posted. There are resources, including references at the end of the slide deck, so you'll all have that available as well. I am going to try and take questions and answers throughout the presentations. One of the things, I have a section on merit review criteria and how to answer that at the end, and I really want to get to that. So that may mean that we don't take quite as many questions early on, or that I may end up going through some of the slides that are a bit redundant. The slides actually include some slides from a presentation Amy Apon gave at the Quote Roundtable in February this year. I think you all know who she is. She's the program director at the NSF, and she is actually the lead program director for the CC Star this time around. Just a reminder, and Jen Schoaf, I think, said this so well when she did her presentation a couple of weeks ago. The information provided in the slide deck is my personal opinion. It's not the opinion of any of the organizations that I consult from, and please check with the program officer if you have questions or clarifications that are needed. Just a quick, and I'm not going to go through this, who I am. In theory, I'm retired, but I currently work part-time on Campus Cyberinfrastructure. Projects mostly focusing on the small and under-resourced campuses. I currently consult about a third of my time for the American Indian Higher Education Consortium. I worked before at the Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center. I was a network engineer by trade. Nobody lets me touch equipment anymore, but I do have a pretty good networking background. So here's what we're going to talk about. The Campus Cyberinfrastructure program. We're going to provide just some background and context. I know many of you have already seen some of these presentations, and I'm really trying not to be redundant. And if I am redundant, that's because I think it's something that really needs to be emphasized. I'm going to talk about what and when to submit. I think the current solicitation is interesting in the options that it provides. I'm going to talk a little bit of the elements of a successful submission, including the merit review criteria. And then we're going to have open discussion. So background and context. I think it's really important to sort of understand the background, why the NSF provides some of these solicitations. And to the extent that you can leverage that when you write your proposal, I think it is really good. So many of you may already know that the National Science Board has this Vision 2030 document that's out there. Again, the link is at the end. Charts a course of action for the U.S. to maintain leadership across science and engineering fields over the next decade. It highlights 4 elements of S&E leadership that are essential. Included in there is infrastructure, and that is what the CC Star solicitation, at least the 4 areas that we're going to talk about, really focuses on infrastructure. The Vision 2030 talks about the investment that is needed in infrastructure, and they talk about data, software, computation, and networking capabilities, the exact things that are in the solicitation. The other thing that is important, and usually when I give these presentations, it's for the regional research and education networking community. But one of the things that this report really highlighted was the importance of regional scientific and innovation networks. And the role of actually building that infrastructure and capacity throughout the nation, especially in areas that are rural or have been left out. I'm not going to go over this too much, but the Missing Millions report, this really talks about those that are missing out of, the cyber infrastructure and the STEM workforce. Some of the information that's in the Missing Millions report provides really good background for the broader impact in one of these proposal submissions. So I really encourage you, if you haven't already gone and read it, to go and look at it. And there'll probably be places in this report that really resonates with you. I know one of the things that I've looked at for what they've talked about in here, it even says the inclusion of tribal communities, as well as rural communities. That really applies when I'm working with AIHEC and the tribal colleges and universities. And again, the link to this report is in the resources slide as well. So there've already been a number of presentations on the campus cyber infrastructure solicitation. The first is the MSCC workshops, and it was 2 workshops. They were focused on the HBCUs, TCUs, and MSIs, but there's a lot of good information there. And then, as I mentioned, Jen gave a presentation a couple of weeks ago that's specifically on EPIC support for the CC Star proposals. And then the Quilt had a presentation last week that really focused on the region focused areas of the CC Star. So I'm going to assume that there is some knowledge that you probably have gone to one or more of those presentations. So I'm trying again not to repeat what was in there. Amy's presentation at the roundtable meeting, the CEO roundtable meeting, I think really laid out the new structure of the solicitation quite well. 5 areas. We're not going to talk about 3 at all, the network integration and applied innovation. I always say, if you have questions on that, please let me know, and I'm happy to answer them offline as well. My email address is at the end of the slide deck. So the 4 main areas that we're talking about today, the data-driven networking, the computing, the data storage, and strategy. Those 4 areas now have both individual, which are the campus or region areas. So when you're thinking about what to submit, you can look at, what do you need from an infrastructure standpoint? And then is it just a single campus, or is it a group of campuses? The money is the campus at 700,000 for an individual campus for the networking, computing, or the data storage. 1.4 million for the region for those 3 areas, and then the strategy is $100,000 for a campus or $200,000 for the region. Just a reminder, the closest deadline is April 22nd, a little bit more than a month away. And the second one is in October. So, the planning grants were renamed to strategy with an explicit region option mentioned. So that's one of the big changes. The solicitation text has been streamlined, but it is very dense. You really have to read it. Even if you have submitted in the past and have received an award and you're resubmitting, please read it carefully again. The introduction includes the list of program-wide criteria. It's almost arranged as a checklist, so that's very important. The program area descriptions have specific directions both for individual and region submissions or awards. Please make sure to read the proposal submission and the proposal process and review criteria sections. I think we all focus so much on the project description that we forget about these other areas. I'm going to talk about the merit review at the end, and that is captured in that review criteria section. So we've already talked about this. One of the things, and I pulled this off, it's interesting to see the number of awards in each area. So for the networking infrastructure, it's a combined 8 to 13. The computing is 8 to 16. The data storage is 7 to 10, and the strategy is 4 to 8. A lot of this depends on, again, in my personal opinion, how many proposals are submitted that are, ranked as competitive. The other thing that's interesting, if proposals are submitted that don't ask for the full amount, then you could see if somebody didn't need the full 700,000, if there were 2 proposals that were, 300 or 350K each, you might be able to fund more. That's the same with the region areas as well. So this is really just a guide, and they tell you this so that you have an idea of how competitive it's going to be. So what to submit? sometimes it's difficult to figure out where to start. So what you want is you want to figure out what's the why. What's the basic cyber infrastructure requirements for your organization, whether you're an individual or a campus? Who are your collaborators and what are the associated skill sets? A different set of collaborators or skills are needed for each of the main areas: network infrastructure, compute, or data storage. So you have to have expertise in networking if you're going to do the network infrastructure. You have to be able to call in expertise for computer data storage if you're submitting in those areas. So what resources do you need? What do you need to support the cyber infrastructure requirements of the applications that you have identified? And what is that funding level needed for your collaboration? It's great to go after the full amount, but if you don't need the full amount, you shouldn't ask for it. The reviewers tend to really look at that and scrutinize the budget in terms of what you're asking for. So make sure it makes sense. Who's the organization? Who's the submitting organization? And that's really important if you're submitting a region grant. Who are you choosing for the principal investigator and who's available for the co-PIs? Often the answers to these questions may surprise you. I have worked with projects where they've been doing a planning grant and the real focus was they thought they were going to be doing a regional network infrastructure grant. And what they realized is the main need in their area was actually access to regional computing resources. And so that's what they submitted. So it's important to figure out what you really need, how that aligns with the applications that you've identified, and then based on that, which is the best area for you to submit. So again, this is pretty simple, figure out what you need and how that fits. What's the strategy? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Strategy proposal is a great place to start. The individual and region, it can be very interesting. For the individual, it's a single campus. You have some experience in submitting a grant. You have multiple science drivers within your institution and in more than one research area. Often this is where one school will submit, but it doesn't have to be. It can be competitive from, a non-research one school as long as they have some experience and have multiple science drivers. For a region, often there's less experience by the campuses that are associated with the grant, that leadership institution or a regional network has been identified. You need at least 2 or more smaller or under-resourced campuses, each with at least one science driver. And this is not a good place to submit for campus infrastructure, computing, or storage for a single leadership institution. That has to go through an individual submission. And the region grants are specifically designed to reduce the barriers of submission for some of the smaller campuses. So if you're thinking of submitting your leadership institution, but you want to share the resources more broadly, then it's good if you have partnerships with smaller campuses in your region. So for the strategy grants that used to be called planning grants, if you're not sure where to start, this is a great place to start. The other area submissions may seem daunting. You don't have a good understanding of the cyber infrastructure requirements within your region. It's also a good first CC Star grant for an institution or collaboration who hasn't submitted a CC Star before, or in fact hasn't submitted an NSF grant. So what is the payoff? And I actually used this chart when I gave my presentation for the quote last week. And so what I did is I looked at the total CC Star grants by state, 2012 through 2024. Note that a lot of the proposals that are being funded out of 2023, October 2023, sorry, that's September 2023, haven't been announced yet. So there was a region area back in 2014 and 2015. Those are the ones in red. There were 6 grants in six states. You can see the number of grants that those states have gotten to date. So the other planning grants, they've been 24 and 18 states. Some are more recent. So you'll see somewhere as recent as 2023, so you wouldn't expect a payoff from those yet, but you'll see that there are a fair number of states with, more than just the planning grant. So they are a great place to start. And again, the answers that you get from your strategy grant may be a little different than what you thought it was going to be. Provides the funding to identify collaborators in science-driven research and education applications. You can develop some of the specific proposal components for a network infrastructure, compute, or data storage proposal, both either in an individual. So if you're an individual campus and you want to figure out what cyber infrastructure is needed in your campus, this is great to go after. In a region at 200,000, it provides a little bit more money to bring around potential collaborators. It's not as complex a submission. Campus CI plan is not required. You could actually use a funded strategy grant to write your CI plan for a subsequent submission. There's no equipment associated with this, so you don't need vendor quotes. You also don't need an application table or a technical solution. So you still must meet the program-wide criteria, but it really expects that you don't exactly know what you need yet for cyber infrastructure. All right, I'm going to pause there, Jason, and see if there are any questions.
Sorry, my mute was muted. So there were two that came in. One is more of a comment. Amy indicated that the April 22nd deadline is now April 24th because there was a scheduled shutdown of grants.gov. And then the second question was from Jen Shope, and she was asking, for the proposal numbers that you listed on slide 12, is that for both deadlines or just the first deadline? They were the allocation number of awards.
So that is what is listed in the solicitation.
Okay.
So that would be a great question for Amy.
All right, that's all we had so far.
Okay. Okay, so general proposal guidance. So I've included some background from Amy's presentation. I think it's always good to know what the program officers are thinking, and to, look if they have taken the time to give a presentation on the solicitation. I think it's really important to read it over. I'm also talking about things that I think are really important, and or haven't been addressed in other presentations this year. As I said, most of this is going to apply to the area 1, 2, and 4. And at times I'll indicate how it might apply to the strategy, which is area 5. I have not covered the merit review criteria, so I'm going to try and get to that because I think that's really important. That's how your proposal is actually evaluated. So this is from Amy's talk in February, and you'll see this over and over again. Read the solicitation very carefully. So this is the specific criteria for areas 1, 2, and 4. I'm not going to read it over, but I think it's really important to look at that. The science drivers and applications, how is that motivate the types of resources that are requested? Some of the previous presentations, both the one that Jen Schoaf gave, as well as the MSCC AIHEC presentations, talk about identifying science drivers. The partnership between the IT, the campus level CI experts, and the domain scientists, the research groups, and the educators, that's really important. Metrics, and project management. These are all things that are very important to think about. And you'll see that this is actually tied to the merit review criteria. So here's an outline that could lead to a competitive proposal. So again, I'm not going to go through this specifically, and I do have some comments on this as well. So some general advice. One of the things that if you look at the outline, that there's a balance associated with this outline, that it's not all about the research drivers. It's not all the technical description. And there's a lot of other things that are in here, the project plan and timeline, What is your dissemination plan, the network management plan? So you really need balance between the research aspect, the science drivers, the technical solution, as well as the support aspects for your project, so that the reviewers know that it will be implemented and managed correctly. So again, it shouldn't all be technical information. Science drivers are the focus, and I say that because I'm assuming most of the people on this call are technical in nature. Just a reminder, the summary table is just one aspect of describing the science drivers. Please make sure your descriptions are clear and concise, especially the technical description. There's no need to repeat some of the background information that's in the campus CI plan or the facility document. You can reference that, but please do not put critical information in one of those 2 supplementary documents to save space. Not a good idea. The outline is a suggestion. If you have a better structure, use it. Just make sure to include all the required information and pay attention to the balance of information. I say this a lot. What is unique about your institution is really your biggest selling point. That includes challenges, especially if the requested infrastructure is going to address the challenges. Challenges are also great motivators for a strategy submission. So one of the things that is a program-wide criteria for the area 1, 2, and 4 is the application table. The guidance is that you should include a summary table of the science drivers in the research environment. I really think it's a critical important of the proposal, provides an easy to read, hopefully, guide to your project. I think you should always include it if you can. Information you could include, and these are examples only, you want to make sure you include what makes sense for your science drivers. So for networking, network requirements for the applications, what's your data flow, what's the total data transfer needs, what is required for an end-to-end flow, workflow for your applications. It's good to indicate, what the 2 ends of your application for, if there's a workflow associated with it and it's a network submission. For computing, you want to focus on the computing resources. So, CPU, GPU type, what's your job profile, times to completion, data or memory requirements, end-to-end workflow again. For storage, it's data sizes, data movement, data curation, end-to-end workflow. Do you have archival requirements that you're trying to meet? Are there challenges that you have? Mention what those are and how you're going to solve them. So information for each science driver should be provided and aligned with the individual application and infrastructure it uses. And again, the applications are probably different, and so you want to be consistent, but it doesn't mean it has to be the same information for each of your applications. It just really has to be aligned with them. Indicate why a specific application can't use a current environment, what the impact on the application in the new environment will be. And here are some examples, faster data transfers, shorter computer runtimes, can get more work done, ability to store larger data sets or faster retrieval times. Please include the quantitative information if you have it. The table should be readable. Again, I'm repeating that. Sometimes people try to put too much information in it, so it's hard to read. I've seen people actually try to shrink the table so that the fonts aren't as legible, and that isn't, legible. Make sure to include text descriptions of the science drivers outside of the application table. So you shouldn't try to put everything just in that table. In my opinion, the application table is a summary of the other information, and I know that I often use it when I'm writing a proposal and I'm doing that application table. I actually use it to go back and check the text that I've been writing as well. So the EPIC Lunch and Learn presentation highlighted the updated focus on the quantitative information. So I'm just going to highlight some of the areas there. You want to provide that information where possible. It helps justify why the applications need the improved cyber infrastructure. It informs your technical choices. Sometimes this is really hard to get. So for example, the applications currently are not using any cyber infrastructure resource, so it's hard to quantify. There's minimal or no monitoring infrastructure in the campus or associated with the applications. Or there's a limitation somewhere in the campus or the region that you're not really sure about. You should mention the limitations if they exist. It helps make the infrastructure requirements more compelling. Just a reminder that researchers and educators often don't have the quantitative information. Campus or region IT must help. This is very challenging for smaller colleges and universities. So again, quantitative information is important, but sometimes it can be very difficult to get. So what can you do? Can you actually get the information before the submission? You can make an educated guess. You can use community provided resources for assumptions, such as expected transfer rates. I go to the ESNet Science DMZ area, and they have a nice table in terms of, what you should be seeing based on your network infrastructure for data transfer rates and things like that. You can do monitoring as you prepare for the grant so that you'll have some quantitative information. Again, this might be challenging for some organizations, but it's something to think about. Ask for help. Epic may be able to help. Your regional network may have some monitoring infrastructure in place that you could leverage. There are computing and storage professionals that you might have access to that are familiar with requirements, but maybe in a different environment that you could then leverage to understand what the improvements in your environment might be. So how do you could include this in a table? We talked a little bit about that before, but you could put a column in that had the current limitations and or the expected improvement, but please make sure it makes sense. If you put numbers in, often there's somebody who's making sure that the numbers actually make sense. So diagrams, they're needed for all three areas. There's specific directions there now. So for networking, it's a network diagram of the proposed network upgrades. So I put in there what's needed for computing and storage. Again, there's a network diagram. The other thing that I think is interesting for this group is that for the three areas, perf sonar is suggested for the network monitoring capability. One of the things that I say, if you're not including persona, you explain why and how the network monitoring will be done. But that's another area where if your campus or your collaboration does not have expertise in this area, there are a lot of resources in the community to support that as well. All right. Jason, any questions?
Not at this time.
Okay, so I get to the section that is at least important to me. So how all proposals are evaluated. I've made a mistake in the past where I haven't paid attention to the merit review criteria. Maybe that hasn't happened to any of you, but I do think that this can be overlooked sometimes, that we get heads down with putting together all the documents, that we forget about how it's evaluated. Make sure to read over the criteria. I think it's good to do it before you actually start writing your project description. Make sure your proposal clearly addresses the listed criteria. There are three types of criteria that are mentioned: the general NSF merit review principles, the program-wide, and the area-specific criteria. Do not leave this up as an exercise for the reader. It's really good to be clear and concise in all of this. So here, and I've actually pulled it out of the solicitation, put it verbatim in here. And what I'm actually going to do is just provide some of my opinions on how you might address some of the review criteria. So again, make sure to address it all. Specific sections on intellectual merit and broader impact are now required, so make sure you look at those requirements and you meet them. Does not hurt to mention both outside the specific paragraphs, because again, that's really the motivation for these proposals. The criteria 3, 4, and 5 may seem mundane, but make sure you address them. And that's what I put on the next slide. So for the criteria 3 is carrying out the proposed activities well reasoned, well organized, and based on a sound rationale. Does the plan incorporate a mechanism to assess success? Lots of ways of addressing this. So can the reviewers understand what you're asking for and why? Please make sure to tell them directly. Have you included ways to assess and measure success? And again, have you been clear on that? How well qualified is the individual team or organization to conduct the proposed activities? Make sure your team clearly represents the components of your project. So you want the IT professionals, the researchers, the educators, and that goes back to that slide from Amy's presentation that I included, that those are sort of the directions for the solicitation. Indicate why you have a strong team. Brag. Don't be shy. Some of this information will probably be included in the supplemental documents, including the CV, but it's really good to indicate why you've picked your team and why you think that they are strong. You can include in committees, including with external participants. It's good to have letters of collaboration if you mention people explicitly within your proposal. The committees and external participants on the committees can show that you're trying to leverage expertise outside your group, if you think that's important. Are there adequate resources, either at the home organization or through collaborations, to carry out the proposed activities? In my opinion, this is really where the facilities, equipment, and other resources document comes into play. I think that helps provide the context in which the proposal is going to be performed. You can reference supporting resources within the project description and indicate that additional information can be found there. But again, if it's important, it should be in the project description, and you shouldn't expect people to go and hunt for it in some of these supplemental documents. A sustainability plan really reinforces, in my opinion, the support for the overall proposed activities. So it's really good to explain what your sustainability plan is. How is the infrastructure going to be supported, after the proposal is over? So there's additional solicitation specific review criteria. So this is in addition to the standard merit review criteria. Again, this is direct out of the solicitation, and I've actually broken it out on the next few slides. So here, that to the extent to which the work provides the needed capability required by science, engineering, and education. This is the connection between the science and engineering applications and the requested infrastructure. You really want to clearly articulate that connection. Why is this infrastructure needed? How will it support the applications? What improvements will be made? Applications need to be in the science and engineering area. I think that seems obvious, but almost every year I get questions about an application that is not in science and engineering, and I will nicely say no. That really wouldn't be considered as science and engineering, but you could include that in broader impact, that the infrastructure would help that. You can say that when you're talking about additional applications and use within the campus or regional area, but it really shouldn't be considered one of your primary applications. So the expected impact on the deployed environment described in the proposal and the potential impact across a broader segment of the NSF community. What is now possible because of this project, both for the project participants, but also outside the specific application areas and/or the campuses, if applicable. And this can also often be called broader impact. This can be where if you, at one of your science drivers actually has some can be applied into like the high school area, that you think that eventually that application could be used for STEM education in the high school. This would be a place to mention that. So how are resources such as access control, federated identity management, or other cybersecurity related issues and community best practices are addressed? The solicitation asks about this in a couple of different areas, so you should be including it in your project description already. So what are your plans for this areas? For example, if you are using federated identity management, explain how it relates to the applications and infrastructure. If you're deficient in one of these areas, again, where applicable, indicate if the project implementation will help for that area. And again, I use federated identity management as an example. In my experience working with some of the smaller campuses that they haven't implemented a federated identity management, that might be a goal of a region project. And if it is, then you describe how you might be able to achieve that goal through what you're doing. Consulting costs, which will be evaluated consistent with the expertise and past experience in building and supporting community research and education cyber infrastructure. Is the project leading to skill development within the team, campus, or region? That's fairly important in terms of sustainability as well as the overall impact of the project. So if you're using consulting services, there are consulting costs. You want to make sure that that consulting is helping to lead to this skill development and knowledge development. So how are you going to use that so that the IT staff or the researchers are better able to use the cyber infrastructure, throughout and then after the grant. The goal is really for the campuses to be able to support the research infrastructure and the applications in the long term. So this is about the cyber infrastructure plan. So this merit review criteria, in my opinion, is really the specific review for the CI plan, which should be no more than 5 pages. So the plan should be tied to the infrastructure you are proposing. If you have an existing CI plan, you should update it for submission. So a CI plan that you're submitting for networking infrastructure will probably look a little different than a CI plan that you're submitting for a computing area or network storage area. There are probably components of it that are the same across the 3 areas, but you want to make sure that you're explaining the strategy for the type of infrastructure that you're proposing. So there's a list of things that you specifically have to address that are mentioned in the solicitation. So it's like manners, IPv6, and some other things. If you're not, if those specific elements are not yet addressed by your proposal, by your campuses, indicate why and why not. So for example, if your campus is not fully implemented, IPv6 or not implemented at all, you should explain why. Indicate if it will be implemented by project end, and if not, just explain why, and that's fine. So there's area 1, 2, and 4 specific review criteria. So again, here's the list straight out of the solicitation, and then some, more details on it. So again, to what extent science drivers and applications motivate the type of resources that are requested. So the connection between the applications that you've selected and the resources you've requested. The partnership between your team. So do the PI and the co-PIs really represent the collaboration? Do you have the appropriate letters of collaboration? Does that represent your partnership? Discuss somewhere in the project description how the collaboration will work and what the opportunities for interaction between the project team, as well as others within the campus or region, if it's a regional submission. And also, can the infrastructure be extended outside the initial set of application drivers? And the answer should be yes on that, again, in my opinion. So make that clear as part of your project description. Metrics. So what are your metrics? How are you going to assess them? How are you going to measure them? And have you explained that in a reasonable way in your project description? And it can be, additional projects that you're planning on onboarding after you get the primary applications on. It could be specific measures of speeds up of, data transfer rates. There are a whole bunch of different ways to measure success. And again, you want to make sure it aligns with your project. And this gets back to the uniqueness of your campus or your region. Often how you're measuring how you've addressed those challenges and, leverage those uniquenesses of your environment can be a great way to do that assessment. The strength of the project management plan, addressing clear goals and milestones, resulting in a working system in the target environment. This provides, in my opinion, some direction for the format of your project management. I think the outline talked about that as well. So make sure you include goals and milestones that make sense for your project. How well is the sustainability of the cyber infrastructure addressed? What is your sustainability plan? Have you articulated it? Commitment to sustain the infrastructure is a required part of the CI plan, I believe. But how do you plan to get to that sustainability? So it's good, in my opinion, to address that in the project description as well as the CI plan. So general tips, so there's a lot to do. There's still time between now and when it's due on April 24th, and I'll fix that before I send you the slides, Jason. A lot of what you're doing is non-technical, and not necessarily the applications, and sometimes that's the hardest part. Please consult the policies and procedures guide. Make sure to check that you're using the latest guide. Yes, I'm shouting because it does change. There are actually some new requirements that went in January. So if you did submit back in September, please go and look. There's, CV formats, current and pending support formats. It may have changed since your last submission. So make sure you check on that. Use a checklist. The solicitation has checklists in it. You might want to update or make your own so that you include the items that are specific to your submission or to your school. I have actually named a proposal wrong. And so when I've gone through the checklist, I've actually caught right before submitting that I did not use the appropriate format for the name of the title of the proposal. So again, this can be really useful. Please beware of internal organizational deadlines. Many universities want the full package 1 to 2 weeks prior to submission, which can be a challenge. And that can also be a challenge with some of the letters of collaboration you might be getting. Which brings us to corralling your collaborators. This is often the most difficult part of a CC STARS submission, getting all the required documents from your co-PIs, your senior personnel, and your application driver collaborators, which may end up being letters of collaboration. You can facilitate the process by having templates for various documents. Please pick the title and PI as soon as possible. Both are needed for your letters of collaboration. I made the mistake of changing the title of our proposal one time, and so we had to go back and get all new letters of collaboration. Often it's good to have one person in your group responsible for communicating and collecting the documents and keeping track of that. This sometimes turns into a nagging function, and so it's good to have someone who has a good user interface ability or bedside manner. One of the things that's important if you're doing a region, and I think this might apply even to some individuals, you may have to drop a co-PI, senior personnel, or application driver if you don't get the information in time to submit. So that could include the CV and the current and pending support for one of your co-PIs. For the smaller colleges and universities, sometimes they are not completely into the National Science Foundation system yet. So you need to get that done. And often it is the case that if a person has never been on an NSF grant before, they are not in the system. Here are the resources. We won't dwell on that. And thank you. And so time for questions, Jason. So we have about 15 minutes for questions.
Yeah, thanks for going through all of that. Amy is just adding one comment there at the end. Don't forget vendor quotes in the set of required documents. These are required for areas 1, 2, and 4. So what I've done is I've allowed people to unmute themselves if you do have questions. So you can either raise your hand and I can recognize you, or you can unmute and ask a question, or you can type it. We are equal opportunity for answering questions.
And while that's going on, Jason, I'm just going to comment on the vendor quotes. And I think that's really important. I probably should have included it in. Sometimes the vendors are really slow in getting you the quotes. And sometimes the quotes do not reflect what you asked them for, or they came in much higher than you expected. So you have to go back and ask them to make changes. So it's really important to, be on to your vendors and get those quotes so that you can submit that full package. And of course, the quotes have a big impact on your budget as well. So that's a really important aspect of the proposal development process.
All right, good notes on that. So I'll ask a question to get us started here until somebody else can offer this. Since this is often a surprise to people who've never gone through this process before, maybe you can talk a little bit about the expectation of when people will hear back from the NSF, either positively or negatively, after they submit for the April deadline or even the October deadline. If you just want to talk a little bit about what their timeline is.
Yeah, so and I'll use the September 23 deadline as an example. And I actually go and download the information from the NSF funding database on a regular basis. So September, I think it was September 11th was the deadline for the last solicitation. The last time I checked, which was earlier this week, 4 proposals were funded, listed, which I believe were funded out of that solicitation. I believe there are many more that are probably in the pre-award process. So it can be, 4 to 6 months before you hear back. So the review panel, this is, a solicitation that is reviewed through review panels. So the panels have to be put together, the reviews have to be held, the results have to be received, and then the award, the PIs that are receiving the awards get notified. And the people who are not getting funded, they usually hear once all of the folks that are getting awarded have gone through that process. Regardless of whether you receive an award or you don't receive an award, you get the reviews associated with your submission. And the reviews are really helpful. If you weren't funded, it gives you an indication of, where you missed the mark, what you should have included. The feedback is great in terms of refining your process, refining your submission so that you can resubmit. I know a number of people who have submitted, were not awarded, got the reviews based on the reviews and then subsequent discussion with the program officers to make sure that they understood the reviews, that they resubmitted and they were funded. So again, you might be disappointed if you're not funded the first time, but again, it's an opportunity to resubmit.
All right, good explanation of the timeline for folks. So still no questions, but I'll ask it again. Oh, and Amy points out in the chat room that the dwell time at NSF is 6 months. So I'll ask the question again. Does anybody want to raise their hand or unmute or ask anything else?
I just wondered how we can get a copy of this presentation PowerPoint.
So I will post this into the usual location in the Google Drive and send the link out in the email to the cyber infrastructure list. And if you receive this via somebody else, hopefully they will be kind enough to send you that information. Any other questions? All right, well, we may be at the end for this week. Any final thoughts, Amy or Wendy, before we close?
I just really encourage people to submit. I think it's a great program. And I really encourage you to look at the region submissions. A lot of small colleges out there that could really benefit from, campus cyber infrastructure and expertise from the community.
Yep, perfect note to end on. All right, well, if people do have questions, Wendy's email will be attached to the email that I send out. So thank you again, Wendy. We'll get the slides and the video posted shortly. And programming note, next week, we will have probably the last talk for a little bit since I'm running out of speakers again. Kurt Dodds from University of Hawaii is going to be talking about astronomy big data and some of the programs and technologies that they've implemented on the Big Island to share some of their data that comes off of the telescopes from that are mounted on the top of some of the Hawaiian volcanoes. So hopefully everybody can join next week. Hope everybody has a good weekend, and we'll talk to everybody soon.